website, trying to find their badges, trying to do COVID tests and etc. But you made it, and you made it in time. We're happy to have you. We also have some two wonderful ladies joining us online. These are part of our panel this morning. But we also have the people who are here physically for the panel, so I'm going to invite them to step up, Simon and Nadine, that I will introduce in detail much later. Welcome. If you can give them a hand. They made it all the way. Thank you. Thank you very much. And then I'll take a seat, if you don't mind, so that I don't look like I'm lecturing. Thank you. My name is Anne Turinayo. I work with the International Fund for Agricultural Development as a country director for Burkina Faso. So I came all the way from Abidjan, and I'm happy to be here in Rwanda. And I would like to welcome each and every one of you to Rwanda, and to Kigali, and to the AGRN Summit, and to this side event particularly. I believe that we are all here because we have an interest in the discussion, in the conversation that is going on for this summit, particularly on the theme, and for this particular side event. So I'm looking forward to your contributions to the discussion. It's not going to be a lecture, as we said, it's a discussion. And so, once again, welcome. So, to start off, I would like to thank the panelists for joining us. We have Simon here, he's from the private sector, from Syngenta, and we have Nadine, who is our Director for Food Systems within IFAD. And as you all know, this event is kind of building on to the conversation that we had at the Food Systems Summit last year. So the experts are here, and people who are interested are here, and we're going to be digging in, on how we can basically be advancing equitable livelihoods for food systems workers, which is an important discussion. So I would like to welcome each one of you in your different capacities, as delegates, as panelists, as individual members. The goal of our time together today is to understand what are those missing pieces and opportunities for policy, development partners, NGOs, individuals, whoever you are, the private sector, to number one, build agency for the most vulnerable people working across diverse food systems, and number two, how we change the power relations along the food systems to make sure that both formal spheres and informal spheres, everyone that is participating in there is actually getting what is their due in a fair and equitable manner. And number three, how do we transform existing structures and embed social norms and practices that systematically privilege certain groups over others? How do we change that dynamic? So we're going to, of course, first discuss the challenges that are existing around this topic, and then what are the commitments that have been made, because there are people that are already working hard behind the scenes, as you hear, to do something about it. And then what are the solutions? Where do we go next? What are the key critical points we shall take home with us today? We will also shine a light on the coalition called the Decent Work and Living Incomes for All Food Systems Workers. And this coalition has been developed in collaboration with different partners, and I think Christine will tell us more about it as we go along. And I look forward to the discussion. So first, I would like to introduce our keynote speaker. Our keynote speaker will be Ms. Maura Barry Boyle. She's a senior deputy administrator, the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security in USAID. Maura serves in this capacity, but before this, she was also working. She's been in development for 30 years. That's very good and impressive. I believe that we're going to learn a lot from that, Maura. And you already also worked for the Center for Excellence on Democracy, Human Rights and Governance in USAID Bureau for Democracy, Conflict and Humanitarian Assistance. Thank you for joining us, Maura. And for your keynote address, if you could please use the podium. You're welcome.
Okay, good morning. Thank you for that wonderful introduction to this event. It's really a pleasure to be here this morning. As you said, I know I saw a lot of people outside still trying to figure out how to get settled, get their badges, get their COVID test. Nonetheless, and I know there's a lot of people online also, so really delighted to be here, especially at a CARE-hosted event, because in my background, more than 30 years ago, early on in my career, I worked for CARE in their headquarters when it was in New York. I also worked for CARE in Sri Lanka, in the former Soviet Union, and then as well in Somalia. So I really learned a lot of important lessons about international development from CARE that have sort of carried me through even to today that I build off of. So pleasure to be here. Great to be here with our panelists who come with also decades of experience to share in this discussion. And it's really a great opportunity to amplify the calls for practical solutions for achieving decent work and dignified livelihoods, and the progressive realization of the right to food for all in agricultural and food systems. As the Coalition of Action on Decent Work and Living Incomes and Wages for All Food System Workers has laid out very poignantly, the resilience and sustainability of agriculture and food systems depends upon overcoming exclusion, inequality, and inequity on so many fronts. It depends on ensuring that the rights and protections of food systems workers are strengthened and upheld, and that all people involved in making our food systems run are themselves able to access and enjoy adequate, nutritious food. It also depends on ensuring that rural and agricultural transformation involves just transitions that produce better outcomes for both people and for our planet. I think all of us are too aware that the layered impacts of the COVID pandemic, of conflict, of climate change, and now Russia's war on Ukraine have shown us that now more than ever before, we must really take a determined action to ensure that our aid investments respond to the ways in which people experience crises differently, and invest in localization and in locally led development. Addressing gender inequality, of course, is a central challenge. At a roundtable that recently convened USAID together with the International Food Policy Research Institute, IFAD, we discussed some really striking data that showed how the global effects of Russia's war on Ukraine are affecting women and girls the hardest and are exacerbating inequalities. And earlier this year, we collaborated with IFAD to bring together funders, international NGOs and UN agencies, and other experts to look at the lessons from the COVID pandemic, as well as the 2007-2008 food price crisis, to develop some concrete strategies to buffer women and girls against short-term impacts and reduce long-term gender inequalities. And these lessons were featured last month in the journal Nature, and I thought it would be good to just highlight two things from that article and from our discussions. And the first was that the pandemic really pushed a lot of people into extreme poverty. And we know that an estimated additional 47 million women and girls were pushed into extreme poverty, and that reversed decades of progress. The data also shows from 40 countries, data that we collected shows that 36% of women stopped working during the pandemic, compared with 28% of men, as shutdowns of schools and child care centers and local markets kept women at home rather than earning an income. And in 2021, at least 150 million more women than men were experiencing food insecurity, and that gap is growing. And even before the pandemic, an estimated 60% of the world's undernourished people were women. Women and girls are also most likely bearing the brunt of rising food, fuel, and fertilizer costs, as entrenched systematic power imbalances mean that women have more difficulties growing and selling crops, running their businesses, and accessing health care and education, and act as shock absorbers, often eating less, eating last, and making sure they leave enough food for children and others at the table. Women time burdens also increase as prices rise. Finding alternatives draws further on their labor. And at the same time, aid programs that we're all involved in tend to favor men with subsidy and voucher schemes, often targeting male-dominated commercial agriculture over the household-focused plots on which women grow food to feed their families and to sell informally. Constraints to full participation within food systems become more acute with identities and circumstances of being young, a person with disabilities, being an LGBTQI+ individual, an indigenous person, displaced, or part of another community that's facing exclusion. Amid a global missing jobs crisis that particularly affects the unprecedented number of youth in developing countries who are 2 times as likely as adults to live in extreme working poverty. Assistance programs continue to adapt, and we must make sure that our collective assistance doesn't inadvertently make matters worse. But the good news is that we know many of the things we need to do to build back better and assure that no one is left behind. And some of those I'd like to highlight. One is gathering evidence. We need to gather evidence and ensure we have sex and age disaggregated data that indicates issues and shows progress in achieving inclusive development. And second, we need to extend anti-violence schemes that address and prevent gender-based violence, such as targeted incentives, including cash transfers that relieve pressure on families to marry off their daughters. We also need to address barriers that discriminate against women and girls and prevent them from entering and advancing as wage workers across food systems. So in order to facilitate women's wage employment, we need to promote gender equitable, decent work, fair remuneration, tackle workplace safety, and gender-based violence in the workplace. And in particular, we look forward to exploring ways USAID can further align with ILO efforts to advance investments in the care economy. And we recently at USAID announced a partnership with the World Bank's Invest in Children initiative. We look forward to learning more about how ILO and others are engaged in this and other aligned efforts to strengthen investments in care. So with that, thank you again for the opportunity to open this discussion, and I look forward to hearing from our panelists.
Thank you very much, Mara, and thank you so much for highlighting the lessons learned that you have shared with us. Thank you so much for highlighting the key issues that we should be looking into. I think I was listening to the panelists before, so talking about the issue of data a lot. Everybody was asking, where is the data? Do we have the right data? Are we able to use it to do to make the right decisions, inform the right policies? And yes, of course, the gender gap when it comes to equitable, livelihoods for food systems workers, knowing that at least on this continent, majority of the food systems workers on the ground are the women. So how are we really addressing that issue? Thank you so much for raising that as well, and addressing the issues of violence against women, ensuring that the people who are working in here actually get the nutritious foods themselves, because usually we are focusing on the market, and people need the money, so they will produce, they will sell, but then they will not leave some for themselves to eat. So at the end of the day, they are again suffering on the nutrition side of things. Thank you so much for those aspects you've raised. And then to take it on, we are going to, I think, have a video message. I'm looking for Molly here because she's the one coordinating the videos. If we're ready, can we have that video, Molly? Thank you.
Over 4.5 billion people derive their livelihoods from agriculture, carrying the food that we eat through every level of our food systems. Yet often, they themselves cannot access the very food that they help produce, and they face really poor working conditions and very limited protections. So we ask ourselves, how can this system be transformed? And how can we ensure that the voices of those who are marginalized are elevated and heard? We cannot address extreme poverty worldwide until we address economic justice and equitable livelihoods for every farmer, fisherfolk, and food worker. This is the foundation for our coalition of action, decent work, and living income and wages for all food system workers.
Agricultural workers regularly face poor working conditions, high levels of working poverty, and a lack of access to rights. In some countries, they are specifically excluded from key legal protections, such as minimum wages, paid sick leave, and the right to organise or to social protection. Guaranteeing safe and healthy working conditions, better incomes, and greater protection for agri-food workers is critical. It's critical if we are to build food systems that can withstand current and future crises.
Dala sukuna ko na fa di be ka do ko ti gadi no do an be nga na fas ko ni gadi no an nga na fa ka di gadi no tal ko me experience ka nga 7 months ko na do wala ni tigo ngam fa nga karam mo yo ye ngam kompida yo le certificate ngam kompida yo dipol ando ko ma na school fees yo ana wudu la fa na ma ko.
The coalition will generate more and better jobs in the food system, especially for youth. By accelerating commitment to decent wages and living income, it will help small-scale farmers reach their potential. It will also extend social protection programs, improve labor market governance, and strengthen social dialogue.
Governments, civil society, the private sector, and academics all have a role to play in bringing this coalition to life. The Dominican Republic has pledged its full support to the coalition so as to improve the livelihoods of our food system workers and their families. We invite you to join us and our partners in making this coalition a concrete reality across the world.
I hope you join us in this call to action to ensure people's rights are upheld and that they can provide for themselves and their loved ones with dignity.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that video, Molly. And I think it totally builds onto what Maura just talked to us about. For those of you who are just joining us, this side event is organized by IFAD and CARE together. And as you could see from the video, also the video was done jointly. And we've just had a keynote address from USAID's Maura Barry. And the issues she addressed are the same ones that have been summarized in the video. So for those of you that just joined us, welcome once again. And now it's time to turn to our panelists. Those who are here in person and those who are joining us online, so that we can dig into the conversation. And by the way, if you're in the audience, you're also going to participate. Like we said, it's not a lecture. We want to hear everybody's voice, so get ready. Okay, so we have a panel that includes Ms. Rima Nanavati. Rima Nanavati is the Executive Director of Self-Employed Women's Association. She's online and she will be joining us. Nima will give us a few remarks and then she will introduce a video to us. We do have Ms. Nadine Bossa, as I already introduced. She's the Director for the Food Systems Coordination within IFAD, FAO, and WFP. She's taking it all up for the food agencies in Rome. Nadine, welcome again. We do have also Ms. Beatrice Gakua, who is the Executive Director of AWAN Africa. She's also joining us virtually. Beatrice, welcome. Then we do have the only man on this panel. You know, we've gotten to that time when we can say the only man on the panel. Usually it used to be the only lady on the panel. Now, welcome again Simon Winter, who is the Executive Director of Syngenta Foundation, private sector company. So to start off, I'll start with Rima, and I have a question, a brief one for you, Rima. If you can please tell us a little bit about the key issues impacting farmers' livelihoods, and then what actions you think we need to take ourselves as individuals, but also as different stakeholders along the food system to improve livelihoods on the ground. Over to you, Rima.
Namaste. Thank you very much for inviting me. And today I speak here on behalf of the 2.2 million women workers, all members of SEVA in the informal economy. And to the question that you just posed to me as to what are the key issues, I think the first and the foremost major issue that we need to resolve or find an answer to is why do workers, and that to women workers in the agri-food system, remain hungry? 40 to 50% of the workforce in the countries of Global South is rural and engaged in agri and food system, and 85% of these women workers are small farmholders, family farmers, or sharecroppers or agriculture workers or food system workers. SEVA's experience organizing these women workers over 4 decades has shown that women are the backbone of the informal workers' household and shouldering the responsibility of fulfilling the family's food and nutritional needs. Women also play a major role in the entire food value chain system, right from production of food to processing on-farm and off-farm, in trading of food and in making decisions about consumption and purchase of food. Women workers in the informal sector, food for them, food security is also a basic human right. So despite such heavy role in the food system and shouldering such an important responsibility, women workers' voice, visibility and validity as food and agri workers is still missing. These challenges are further compounded due to increasing climate shocks and market shocks, making food system, working in the food system more and more unsustainable, non-profitable and unviable. Therefore, increasing the burden on women in care and also women subjecting to violence. In addition to these challenges, there are challenges such as lack of access to affordable and reliable clean energy, modern tools and equipment, direct market access, technical and marketing skills, access to affordable finance, and lack of awareness about various other avenues. Therefore, the question still remains is why do women workers in the agri-food system remain hungry? Some of the solutions which have worked for us are that one needs to treat every farmer as an entrepreneur and farm as an enterprise. The second important and very important aspect is organizing. Organizing the women workers in the agri and food system helps in building their collective strength and bargaining power, which is also a key element in building women's leadership and building women-owned and managed value chains. Therefore, I think that's the most important. We have several examples. We have our members' own agribusiness initiative, Ruby, which connects over 250,000 small farmers and workers in the food systems. It brings nutrition and food security to over 1 million households today. In this process, the small farmers get fair returns, the landless workers get employment. The company now has also brought in mobile application, which enables real-time procurement, sales, and inventory management. Therefore, I think what is really needed is building local decentralized supply chains owned and managed by the women themselves, and creating affordable access to finance so that it builds resilience of the workers in the food system. And we call it as a global climate resilience fund for women. Thank you so much. I would like to show a film now. May I request Molly, you can have the film, please.
Food, the most basic necessity for the humankind, ironically, as the most complex system. Food must not be reduced to security, to a system, or to a state's trading language. Food is the culture of life. If access to safe, nutritious food is a fundamental right, why are 820 million people living in hunger? Why are people in food exporting countries sleeping hungry? More than half of the world's workforce is engaged in agricultural production. When we talk about the food systems, it involves not only farmers, but agriculture workers, laborers, food processors, sellers, distributors, and a lot more. Today, the face of agriculture is female. This lack of a woman's voice and visibility is the most crucial cause for the fractured and inequitable food system. Therefore, the first area to rebuild from the bottom up is the global food supply system. And organizing is the key.
અમે સંગઠિત થયા 19 લાખ બહેનો. સંગઠન દ્વારા સમયસર પૂરતું ખાતર બિયારણ મળ્યું. ટકાઉ ખેતી અને રોગ જીવાતથી બચવાની તાલીમ મળી. અમે અમારા સાધનો હજારની લાઇબ્રેરી પણ ઊભી કરી. આધુનિક ટેકનોલોજી વાપરી શીખી અને અમે અમારા રોજગારને હરિયાળું બનાવ્યું. એટલું જ નહીં, અમે અમારી રોડી કંપની ઊભી કરી. સફાઈ, ચોખાઈ, પેકિંગ, વેચાણ બધું અમે જ કરીએ. અમે ત્યાંય ના અટક્યા. અમે અમારી બેકરી અને ભોજનનું કેન્દ્ર ખોલ્યું, કમલા.
એક મિનિટ, સંગઠિત થઈને સિસ્ટમ તો સુધારી, પણ 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 અને 13 SDG પણ પૂરા કર્યા.
અમારા જેવી હજારોને લાખો સમજી બહેનોને એવી સિસ્ટમ જોઈએ કે જેમને પૂરતું પોષણ અને સન્માનભર્યું જીવન પણ મળે. સંગઠન માત્ર મારા ગામનું કે દેશનું નહીં, આખી દુનિયામાં જોઈએ તો જ વેળો પડે.
Well, thank you very much, Rima. That was nice and exciting. And thank you so much for raising the issues about organizing in building local supplies, supply chains and systems that work. And I'm sure that when Simon gets to talk, he'll get more into detail on that. And it's interesting. I mean, as Maura mentioned, the shocks, COVID-19, the war in Ukraine, and the way we are feeling them all the way right now on the ground. In Burkina Faso, where I work, is Sierra Leone, where I've worked before you, and you're thinking, some of these people even have no idea where Ukraine is on the map. They've never heard about it, and all of a sudden they're being told, no, sorry, I'm not licensed because there is a war going on somewhere in Ukraine. That means there is something that we should do at this point. So moving on anyway to Beatrice. Beatrice, thank you also for joining us remotely. We had thought we would have you here, but life is life. And by the way, it's a good thing. It's the first time we're doing this after COVID-19, so yay. We will still be all kind of videos, perhaps in our pictures, and then a clean face, just online. But now we're here. We are thankful for the vaccines and for the ability to join, to be together in person again. Beatrice, thank you for joining us. And can you provide us with some insights on the issues facing food systems workers in the African context? We heard from Rima, from the other side, on the Asian side. If you can tell us from the African context, please. Thank you. You have 3 minutes, because we are now beginning to run out of time. You're muted, Beatrice. You need to unmute yourself.
I'm not muted.
Okay, now.
Can you hear me? Yeah. As I was saying, thank you, moderator. And I think 3 minutes is very little to speak about the continent. Thank you, knowing that IGF is mostly about the continent. But anyway, so I will try to make it short. So I will not repeat the statistics that were given by previous week's Maura. Hello, Nima. Nima is my colleague from the other side. We share the same insight, the same mandate. So I just want to start by saying that the poorest and the hungriest person on the continent is an African, is a woman living in a rural area and working in the food system. I think that's another statement. Everyone has summarized what is happening and really being on the ground. One Africa, which is a non-profit for women in agribusiness, and we have 4,000, and I'm speaking about 3,000 to 4,000 registered businesses owned by women and young women that are employing on average 500,000 informal workers. Now you can imagine what this is all about and what has happened during the COVID. In 2022, we made a study to see the impact through our network of COVID impact on their business. And I think Anna spoke about it, and also Maura spoke about it. And what I really want to say is that we all know for decades again that 70% of the food we eat is produced by those small-scale farmers and medium-scale farmers, because they are the ones who employ the small-scale and the workers. And we are always talking about solutions and the problems and the solution. And really COVID has highlighted the gaps that exist in addressing those issues. And this crisis that we are in on global food crisis and food security shows that we are far away as a continent to reach food security. How do we go from talking about issues and solutions that obviously last year we talked about on the track 4 for livelihood, and we have statistics out there. How do we now move and implement those activities? I think while we are collecting data, I think we have also enough data that shows that the gap is there, the problem is serious, the crisis is getting bigger and bigger. How do we strive and collect evidence while we conduct some concrete actions? Obviously, the fact that the women workers are the malnourished and they're going hungry, but also it's the whole family that we know in Africa, they feed the family, and the family of, on average, is 6 people. Now we just, extrapolate on the way that malnutrition is going to be affecting the communities, and we are already there, even though we don't have data now, and it's very urgent for us to continue collecting. We can see it on the streets, we can see it everywhere, that the crisis is there, and there is just expensive, and those women who lost their job because the small and medium business have lost their income, and after that they did not have access to emergency funds for them to be able to restart their businesses. The crisis is going and building up. So we, of course, as one of my members told me, because I always ask them, we are going to speak on this conference, what do you want me to ask? And their ask is, when are we going to start addressing this issue? When are we going to have access to funds to be able to restart our business so we can continue creating and, of course, creating, I'm not saying already, at least creating and keeping the employees they had before COVID, because really this is, I think Anne will agree with me on the ground, this is something that we have to address. I think I don't want to go on the list of problems because we know them, and the solutions and game changers, we have addressed them during the Food Systems Summit, and I think now what we expect, at least at the end of this and also the coalition, I think all of us in the coalition, we have the list of the activities that need to be done now. We have prioritized them. I think we just need to put our heads and resources together and our knowledge to start acting now. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you very much, Beatrice, for your contribution. Let's give her a hand. You've also re-emphasized the issue raised by Lima with access to affordable finance. I think that's a topic on its own. We could have a whole conference on that. So affordability and accessibility to finance. And as we are talking about resilience, we cannot build resilience definitely without people having access to finance. To build back better. There is the issue of Equitable, but there's also inclusivity. I know that we're talking about women and youth. Let's not forget that there are also persons with disabilities and other people that need to be included. So as we talk about equitability, we need to also continue remembering the inclusivity. Now, on to our panelists who are here. I'll start with Nadine. By the way, a pleasure to have Nadine here. She's been my direct supervisor before moving on to her current role. So we've worked together closely, and I can attest to Nadine's astuteness when it comes to looking out for the small-scale farmer, at least. I'm sure of that. So, Nadine, now in your current role, you have followed closely the UN Food Systems Summit. What does advancing equitable livelihoods mean, and how does it fit as part of a wider food system transformation? Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. And I think Rima and Beatrice have exemplified through their talk and the video what the issue of equitable livelihood is in the food system. And I think we are here in a very kind of knowledgeable audience, and I spoke to some of you before starting this meeting, that you all know what the issue of equitable livelihood in this food system is. Anne is right that I have the role of Director of Food System Coordination in IFAD, but I also wear another hat, which is leading the Financing Food System Transformation Agenda. And here I'm insisting on finance together with a colleague from the World Bank. IFAD and the World Bank are supporting the United Nations Hub on behalf of the UN system to look into the financing agenda. So I want to take a bit of a different angle and start talking to you from a financing perspective. what does it mean, this equitable livelihood? And I think, Laura, you started by saying that there's about 4.5 billion agricultural workers or farmers who depend basically on farming in terms of livelihood in the world. In terms of weight, financial weight, we have to remember when we talk about food system that it's the biggest employment sector in the world. And it's also something that people don't, I think, emphasize enough. When I heard Rima and Beatrice talking about access to money and the need to increase financing, it's a sector which is worth $10 trillion a year. So it's huge, it's 10% of the global GDP. So there's actually a lot of money going in the food sector, and the video was saying it's because it's a basic human need. I mean, we sleep, eating is vital for everybody. So it's a big business. So you ask me, what does it mean in terms of equitable livelihood when we see so much money, and I'm insisting on the trillions of dollars because we speak so much of mobilizing money, more resources going into this system. It's not acceptable anymore that 2/3 of the 74 million people living in poverty are smallholders or are agricultural workers. That again, it was mentioned that 570 million farms in the world, I mean, about 90% are run by smallholders, and they produce 1/3 of the food in the world. You all know that. And in all countries, in the African continent, it's about 70% of the food. So I worked before in Nigeria, and you see that while they produce that level of food, the majority of them, 70%, live in poverty. I think this kind of data is eloquent to say, we need to change this. We need to have some equity that those people producing the food and basically feeding the world cannot be living in poverty and hunger. And as I said, we were in Nigeria, they were talking of the army of smallholders. If they're also agricultural workers, if they don't get out of poverty and hunger, there's no way these targets are going to be achieved by 2030. We are already off track. I think everybody knows it's not going to be achieved. But there's really kind of a strategy of providing, you said it, equitable livelihood, wage, decent work conditions for these people who are feeding the world, and at the moment the system is basically failing them. The second question I was asked to deal with is that what does it mean for the food system transformation agenda? And you know that one of the action track, one of the 5 big decisions of the Food System Summit is to pay attention to the issue of equitable livelihood, and that basically needs to be looked into. Again, data speaks louder than words sometimes. As I said, up to 70% in the African continents of the smallholders are living off poverty. I'm a woman, it's a woman issue, but it's a generational issue. It's for the youth, it's for the men, it's for the women, it's for the children. It's really an issue which is on the continent. The second thing is the issues of those who are not the smallholders, but who are the agricultural workers. And I was discussing with you a very interesting study from the World Benchmarking Alliance, looking at the food businesses in the world. And let me allow me again to talk about money. They analyzed the most 350 powerful, if I can say, food businesses in the world, which basically produce about 50% of the world revenue in food. And it's interesting to see that the food business today, the biggest food business, less than 10% of them have decent wage and working condition as part of the target. And also less than 10% of them have social inclusion and fair practices as part of the target. And 2/3 of them do not disclose specific targets on wage, on negotiation, balancing power within the organization. And it's not for the lack of wanting it, because they have declared they want to do it. And when we speak to some of those businesses, they ask us, how do we do that? And so this is why I would like to say, what is part of the food system transformation agenda is that we have to work on standards. We have to work on norms. We have to work, I heard it, Brian was saying, on targets. And yes, we have data, but we also need to work on data, because we were talking before that there's very little data when you want to say what is equitable livelihood, where are we, how are we progressing. there's nobody really measuring that for smallholders, for agricultural workers in the developing world. And the SDGs, the MDGs show us if you don't have targets to achieve, there's very little progress. Everybody needs to go in the same direction. So, as part of the financing agenda, what we are trying to establish is that how can we help government, donors, food businesses include basically social inclusion, equitable livelihood into their financial decision. Now, many of them include climate. Do we also include nutrition, health, fair wage as targets? And not only on an emotional basis, because you know emotion when you talk to business. I have a CEO who told me if I go to my board and I tell them that, you know, I have to work for the SDG, it has to be equitable, it has to be fair to women, my shareholders will say, are you serious? I mean, basically, what's the return on investment here? You see, I will not last for very long in my job, so I need to speak in terms of money. And we know today, again, you have studied, for example, by the FOLU, Land Use Coalition, Food and Land Use Coalition, which is that it costs about 0.7 trillion a year to the world. The fact that people don't have fair wage and decent conditions, they cannot buy, they cannot operate, there's emergency assistance, there's basically the social security net, so there's a lot of savings there by having a more efficient system. So we are also trying to take the financial argument, which sometimes goes beyond the emotional when financial decisions are being made. And as I say, data, target, standard norms, the toolkit on how to do that is the way we are trying to promote that in the food system transformation agenda. And I think, don't know if I've used all my 4 minutes, but let me stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadine, and I'll come back to you because the issues you raised are hot. I think there is one thing that you once mentioned in a meeting, you probably don't remember that. The level of investment we put as we say, oh, we want to do this project and we expect to invest this much money, but we go back down to thinking, how much are we really investing per individual, per household, and is that amount really going to get that person sustainable out of poverty? It's a question that we all need to ask ourselves when we talk about financing. Where is the money? Where is it going? Is it going where we say our priorities are, or is it staying somewhere else? Because if it's going there, then we should see the change that we would like to see. And this is a good segue into the private sector. Simon, you're up. Because we believe that the private sector has also most of the money, and we believe that we cannot have equitable livelihoods for food systems workers without involving the private sector. So my question to you is, as I've mentioned, the private sector is a key part of the puzzle in tackling these issues. Can you tell us a bit about the issues in the workplace, supply and distribution chain, and some of the most promising interventions you have seen from your perspective? Thank you.
Great, thanks. Great to be here advancing this very, very important discussion. So, and very nice to be a token male for once on a panel. So, I appreciate the inclusion that way around. So, I think when we talk about the private sector, there are different layers within the private sector, and it's really important to have that segmentation because the behaviors and incentives and potential are quite different depending on which part of the private sector you're talking about. So where we see most action at the moment, notwithstanding the very good observation relating to the World Benchmarking Alliance's survey, is from the global players. So they may not have stated commitments and targets in some areas, but there's still a lot of action happening. And what I've actually been thinking about as I was preparing my remarks for this is, when we look at private sector action around climate, we now see that there's Scope 1, Scope 2, Scope 3 commitment frameworks. And what you're seeing is most progress on climate in Scope 1 and Scope 2, which relates directly to the company's direct business activities. And Scope 3 is really dragging, which is more the supply chain, distribution chain issues. And I think we see a parallel of that in terms of global companies and their approach to decent work and living incomes and wages. They're much more attentive to this in their own factories, in their own distribution centers, in their own supermarkets and so on, than they are in the supply chains and the distribution chains. So I think one thing worth thinking about is, could we come up with an equivalent on the Equitable this framework for that scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, where then you could have a framework where those targets and those standards and those norms could actually be embedded in a proper structure. I think you would still see that it would be the global private sector that would probably lead in first on that. And we are seeing a lot of action, particularly in export crop value chains, where there has been particularly cocoa, coffee, vanilla, and a number of other key crops. A lot of work done on trying to boost living incomes and wages in those particular value chains. So there's a lot of promising work coming out there. There was a recent event organized by IDH in the Netherlands, I think a couple of months ago now, looking at the advancement that's being made by both the Living Income Community of Practice, which organized that, but also the Living Wage Coalition, on establishing not just benchmarks in those sectors, but also baselines, so that data that you talk about is starting to be generated, so we can really understand the gaps that need to be closed, not just what the targets are, and then track that and so on. And this is a very limited set of farmers who are being reached. I mean, if you add up the total number of smallholder farmers, for example, in cocoa, coffee, banana, and so on, I would be surprised if it exceeds 30 million. And yet we have probably 500 million smallholder farmers who still live in poverty and are exposed to all the vulnerabilities that my fellow panelists have talked about. So then we go to the local food companies and local SMEs, and that's a huge theme this week as AGRA and all of us who are stakeholders trying to improve African food systems. We really need to boost the potential of local food processing SMEs, local sourcing SMEs, local distribution SMEs, and so on. But their reference point is typically a minimum wage legislation, if there is a minimum wage legislation. And minimum wage it's not necessarily the same as living wage. So again, this issue of the benchmarks comes up. And what are those gaps, even between living wage and minimum wage? And then you get to the farmers. And my colleagues have talked about this as well, but I really want to pull out this point that the smaller the farm and the poorer the farmer doesn't necessarily mean they're not hiring wage workers. And the most vulnerable and the most exposed and the most at risk are women migrant wage workers on small farms. And there's no website anywhere for those people. And they are literally the most vulnerable and the most abused. And I think in a prep discussion, Beatrice didn't, I think, use that term today, but she said there's a sort of modern slavery actually that often is going on in those farms. But it's not just the smallest farms. I was in a discussion recently with a brewery company operating in Nigeria, and they are sourcing from commercial scale farmers in Nigeria, and really struggling because those commercial farmers have pretty low productivity levels and therefore can't afford to pay their workers very well. And yet they want to help them achieve decent incomes. So what are some of the things that we should be doing? Well, we certainly need to strengthen these communities of practice and engage in more value chains, but we also need to look at cross-value chain initiatives. Now, coffee companies are not going to readily boost the diversification of coffee farms which are needed, both in terms of adaptation to climate as well as achievement of living incomes and wages. And that cross work between different companies within the food system is really, really important. We need those kind of coalitions to come together. We also need to recognize this huge potential for agri-entrepreneurship for workers and farmers, depending on a single crop and depending purely on your farm for its income. It's probably not a pathway in most cases to achieving a living income. Off-farm activities, moving into entrepreneurship, this is a big area where our foundation focuses that. That has to be a key priority. I know I'm talking about the private sector, but the private sector needs government. And governments need to establish these national and regional and local benchmarks and then work together to build the targets and the norms and so on that you talk about. And then Rima and Beatrice talked about this. I mean, this point about farmers organizing and workers organizing themselves and getting support for capacity building to be effective in their collective bargaining and discussions with partners. And then we also need, as everybody's alluded, the reporting piece. My final point, and our contribution, I'm part of a small group of private sector organizations that's been contributing to the coalition. And we are also, and again, I want to just echo Beatrice's point about the urgency. We're now close to a year beyond the Food Systems Summit, and we're still waiting at this point in time for the initial countries to come up and commit themselves to establishing benchmarks that we, as private sector organizations, can then engage in and helping to close and address those gaps between the baselines and the benchmarks and drive the collective action types of agendas I'm alluding to. Final thing I want to mention, and a few speakers have come up with this as well, is the climate link. There's a lot of interest now. I'm picking up, and there's going to be a lot of discussions this week here at AGRF about climate finance in particular. So there's many types of financing, but climate finance for adaptation is a critical dragging and lagging area. It's not to say there isn't money available. I mean, the Green Climate Fund has to spend 50% of its pretty huge resources on climate adaptation, and 50% of that has to go to Africa, small island states, and the least developed countries. And they don't know how to spend that money because they don't know what good adaptation is. And there's a very, very key component of adaptation, which is around livelihoods and incomes. So there's a piece of it, there's a kind of opportunity space and an imperative space to draw those connections into this coalition as well, which is not yet part of what the coalition is focusing on. So lots of work.
Thank you very much, Simon. And just want to put you on the spot, but I have a follow-on question for you. You've talked about, the wages, minimum wage, living wage for food systems workers, but beyond that, beyond wage employment, what issues and opportunities are presented by self-employment? And I would like you to answer this question, given the background of what we did just talk about, financing or real estate, still financing the latest online mentioned about access to finance. Over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of alluded to some of that, but some of the work that we've been framing up within the coalition is to look at this, let's say, how do you have integrated packages of support for self-employed people within food systems, whether they are agri-entrepreneurs and or smallholder farmers or some combination thereof. So we need those self-employed people to not only have a market opportunity, but then the support from that market opportunity to make sure that they can achieve a decent level of productivity in their actions, so that it's not just about the price point, it's about the actual amount of revenue they receive, and whether that revenue really then helps them achieve a living income benchmark. So that means that we need action on procurement, we need action on human rights, we need action on skill development, we need action on sourcing strategies, we need the technical services, agronomic services, etc., all to be packaged into these kinds of interventions to empower and help those people empower themselves.
Thank you very much, Simon. Beatrice, if you don't mind, I'll come back to you just a brief second. Would you please tell us what are the effective ways to advocate, and to ensure that we have programs that empower participation in the food systems? From your experience, just in a minute, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Simon, for bringing up all the things we discussed previously and that are very relevant to this. I think from my many years of experience from the UN systems and now in the private sector, and being an entrepreneur myself in the agri sector, I think what is very important here is to push for concrete and a positive dialogue between the private sector and the government. On minimum wage, even though we know it will not be effective, at least it will be a starter benchmark. What is it that is the minimum wage speaking to the minimum income for getting out of poverty? Because we all know that poverty is about income levels, right? And I'm sure that those who are not even in the agriculture sector, living in the urban area, and the daily workers, they have the same problem, but it's compounded in the rural areas. And on the continent, I think it's very important the private sector the government and the donors sit on the table urgently to discuss where to relocate the funds, where to complement each other, and not working in silos and only meet when we have to have this kind of gathering. Yes, the private sector play a big role in hiring intermediaries who are taking more profit than the small-scale farmers and exploiting, quoting, in inverted commas, the workers. But please let us remember that private sector is also doing what the donors and the government is not doing. They are bringing in standards, plans for quality control, etc. So it is urgent that they sit down and speak together to get minimum wages, to bring up the funds. I think they talked about IFAD. I think it's. Yes, yeah, we talked about it. Money is there, but who is having the money? It's between the government and the private sector. It doesn't trickle down to go into improving procurement, into giving us the people who are on the ground to upgrade skills. But upgrading skills is not enough. We've been doing that for many years between government and donors, and upgrading skills. 2 months later, when they don't have access to finance, it is not helping. So this is very urgent. And what is even my last word on this? What are the mechanisms to make sure that this dialogue is happening and the results are coming out? I think this is what I should be saying on this.
Thank you very much, Beatrice, for your contribution. And I'm going to turn immediately back to you, Nadine. What is the role of development agencies on these issues? And what work is IFAD doing currently to address the issues that we've raised? Over to you.
Thank you, Anne. What is the role of development agencies? I think I want first to challenge ourselves, because we are always kind of setting the clock again and again and again on the issues we have to address. And being in some call it the development industry, I say maybe we are one of the least results-focused industry, in the sense that we've been looking at these issues for decades now. Development partners together with governments, together with the private sector, and the issues of the food systems are structural, and we know what they are. I mean, we are here I heard Beatrice saying we need to sit down and talk about decent wages, about working conditions. There's the issue of access to productive assets. Rima was talking about access to microfinance, access to land. We now talk about the issue of conflict, the issue of climate. These issues, some of them are newer, climate, but some of them have been with us since the 1960s. So when we ask me the questions what development partners should do, knowing that the countries, the government, civil societies are in the driver's seat, I would like to say, what do we have to do differently? Because we have invested billions as development partners into now we call it food systems. Before it was agriculture. Now food system is more than agriculture. But we all know what we are talking about. It's been going on for decades. Don't get me wrong. We all have a job. We want to believe we do it well. So there's been some progress looking at the data. We know that since the 1960s, agricultural production has tripled. There's more food per capita than ever before. We are feeding like 7 billion people now versus 3.5 billion. But again, the numbers are increasing. So something is not right. And development partners are now again with government focusing on the emergency agenda. Because of the Ukraine war, because of the impact of the COVID-19, we need indeed to provide assistance, support, and facilities to the most vulnerable. And I'm not saying it's not necessary, but as in my role as Director of Food System and IFAD, we need to continue to look at the long-term agenda. This transformation needs to take place, otherwise today it's COVID, tomorrow it's Ukraine, and you have a very powerful OECD studies which tell you actually food prices are supposed to go down because there's enough being produced in the world. the reason why they might go up, and they presented that at the Food System Summit last year, so the only reason why food prices should go up, because it should be stable now, if there is a conflict. And bam, the year after there is a conflict. And the whole world, sorry for the expression, is messed up, and the hungry people are increasing, and we expect them to increase with the Ukraine war. So what I would like to say is that, again, looking at the financing agenda, we must do things differently. And it was defined during the summit 5 imperatives. Again, I want to say this money. When we talk about equitable livelihood, and you have $700 million of subsidies by OECD and most advanced economies going into the agricultural sector, depressing prices, not making it profitable for the smallholders Beatrice and Rima is talking about. Are we talking of putting more money of the system or doing things different? At the same time, these are the countries which are providing development assistance in order to increase production, which cannot compete with these subsidized imports. We also have the responsibilities of the governments. I'm talking about the African government. We've been on the Malabo Declaration to increase investment in agriculture since 2007, 10% of national budget. Many countries are still at 1%. I think one country, I wonder if it's not Rwanda, by the way, is achieving the target of putting 10% of its budget to invest in agriculture. So this is not happening. In terms of livelihood, in terms of women, in terms of gender, youth, I mean, for how long have we been setting targets? So I think it's a question of today of political leadership, of decision, and of coherence. I had colleagues who told me that the way food systems are being financed is insane. What we put in a way, as I said, in subsidies, to distort the market, then we put it back in terms of development cooperation, not at the same level. Yet the partner government are not investing the right amount of money, and the institutions and the policies are not fit for purpose, so we are in a vicious circle. So I think I would say that it's time to look at this agenda in a very frank and open manner, and say what do we do differently now to really make inequitable livelihood, poverty, and hunger a history of the past. And I'm not sure we are there yet. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Nadine. Yes, I can talk to you. I think, the idea behind resilience is that when the shocks come, people can still get up and walk, But clearly we're not there, as COVID has told us, as the war in Ukraine has told us. Thank you, Nadine, for, saying that. So are we doing things differently, or are we going to continue to do them the way we've done them? I mean, it's a whole discussion, and I'm glad that we are the first panel decided here to discuss this. And on this note, actually, I would like to invite those ones who just came in, please come forward, because now we're going to open up the floor to the audience. Now, I would not like you to be at the very back. Move closer. We were talking about being a small, cozy crowd. So just do move up front, please, and you give us your contributions. But really, thank you again, Nadine, for raising that. How are we going to do things differently? I mean, just not saying it, but actually doing it. I'm sure that Rima and Beatrice will be interested in hearing this. Now, I asked everyone the second question, and now I'm going to have to ask Rima as well, because I think I missed asking you my second question, Rima, and you're the last one before we get to the audience. And so for you, if you could, and this is a very interesting question, if you could have a magic word and choose one action to advance this agenda of promoting equitable livelihoods for food systems workers, what would it be, Rima?
Great, I do want a magic wand to be there with all of us so that we are able to see something moving forward with the food systems agenda. And I feel that to push forward this agenda, there's a need to adopt a human-centered approach. One that puts the interest of the workers, the women workers, the disabled, in the food system at the heart. While the current pandemic and the economic slowdown, the different climate crises, the heat wave, the floods that the countries in South Asia are also experiencing, has made these women and the workers in the food system more vulnerable. It has also created an opportunity for us to rebuild our food system so that the interest of the workers and amongst them the most vulnerable is at the heart of decision making and public policies. And such a human-centered food system needs to be based on, I think, 3 strong pillars: the leadership of women workers, supported by lifelong skilling, and sustained investments, and transformation of the food system economies from profit and prosperity to food system economics of nurturance and well-being. I will repeat the last one. The transformation of food system economics from profit and prosperity, which we are having today, to a food system economics of nurturance and well-being. And I think that will help us build an economy of nurturance, which will help the vulnerable workers in the food system build their own resilience against the climate shocks and the market shocks. And that's the kind of resilient food system we urgently need to start thinking and moving towards. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rima, again. So over to the audience, I'll ask you the same question. If there is one thing that we could do right now to enhance, to have a better and more equitable, livelihood for food systems workers, what would it be? If you have a response, a quick one, the microphone will come right to you, and you have 1 minute. I mean 1 minute per person, so that we have more people contributing. Thank you. Your time. The microphone does not work. Gentlemen at the back, if you could help us. But if you're a teacher, go ahead and start.
I can ask what's now. So my name is Sophie Chiteze. I am country director for AGRA in Malawi. I want to raise just one aspect that I've observed working with different partners in the agriculture transformation agenda. There are 2 lines of thoughts that are communicated. Some feel like we cannot transform agriculture concentrating on the smallholder farmer. And some say, the proportion of smallholder farmers is too huge. If we ignore them, we will not achieve the SDGs, as Nadine said, which I totally agree with. And then we bring in solutions, like we talk about mechanization. You look at the smallholder farmer land holding and how challenging it is to enable them, utilize those pieces of land and produce more efficiently and in large volumes and then in an organized manner. Sometimes I feel like as development practitioners, we shun the more difficult work where change will be guaranteed, and then we want to continue the business as usual. So one solution that I'm proposing is, let's go for it, propose solutions that are workable, and we have lessons all over, so that the smallholder farmer can really be a key contributor, and the equitable livelihoods will be achieved.
Thank you very much. Yes, there is another hand. Oh, wonderful. Okay.
I am Narendra Nath. I work with an NGO called Pradhan in India. Though Rima Ben in her presentation said the face of agriculture. I mean, if you say Indian agriculture, I think a lot of it will relate to Africa as well. So the face of agriculture is the woman. I just want to make a little correction there, and that would be my one. Just you also know that one thing firing will not actually help equitable livelihoods. Many things need to fire together. But even then, from a perspective basis, the face of the agriculture, if it is a woman, I need to make a little amendment there. The face of the agriculture in India, at least, is a smallholder or marginal and landless leaseholder farmers in the rain-fed areas and the women. So this is the actual more, let's say, more accurate description of the phase. And we need to work at each of these components. You have to work at the smallholder, her productivity, and from a regenerative, climate resilient technologies, and there are many solutions available. So that is one need to be done. The marginal, and they have less land. So you know something, they need to have rain-fed, marginal, and the smallholders. They need to have both land tenure security and water security. Massive investments need to go into ensuring water and land security and quality resources to them. And most importantly, the woman part. The woman, her again, if you further drill down into that, she's not the younger woman. It is the older or the middle-aged woman who are into agriculture, because the men, the young women, the young men, none of them want to do agriculture. They're all migrated because of the distress situations. So we need to get them back into the village. How can you get the youth more attracted and more, so how can you make agriculture more aspirational so that the youth are, and the men also come back into doing agriculture along with the women. Otherwise this feminization is again a facade, because it is out of distress that the woman is doing agriculture because nobody else is doing it. And she also doesn't own the land. I mean, it's just, she's doing it because nobody else does it. So we need to work at each of these components. Then I think if you can really talk about equitable and resilient livelihoods for everybody. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much. What I'm hearing from the audience basically so far is let's not shun the hard work that needs to be put into the ground. Like when we talk about small-scale farmers, it's very hard then to get one small-scale farmer moved from one level to another. If you talk mechanization, and he just mentioned access to land. Somebody has an acre or even a quarter of an acre, and you want them to mechanize. So you have to like get mechanization, but that is suited to do just that one small piece, and that piece he also just mentioned perhaps doesn't belong to the person because it is community land, it is family land, it is your husband's land. You're not allowed, at the moment you develop it, chances are they are going to take away the gains anyway. So what I'm hearing from the audience is let's not get scared of doing the hard work. It's hard, but it will pay. And we continue with your audience. Please start by introducing yourself.
Thank you very much. My name is Nene Kayumba. I work for Rural Development Initiative, RDR, here in Rwanda. It's a youth and agriculture development organization. So one thing I can propose is to work on market system or market linkage for the smallholder farmers. Because most of the time, those smallholder farmers, they don't gain a lot from their hard working. So the business people and other middlemen in between, they benefit, but when you analyze closely, those farmers, they are not benefiting very well. So if we are to change this food system, we have to make sure the market is working for those small farmer holders. So the second, I think I have to learn the strategy, we have to learn the strategy to envelop the young people, because the young people, they are flexible, they are innovative, and they see their future. They still have the future, and with this innovation and flexibility with technology, I think they can contribute a lot in the food system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Flora Kirera. I work for Farm Input Promotions Africa, based in Nairobi, Kenya. My thoughts about, when I think about women, I always ask myself, what is the role of men in women being able to make decisions around the farm? And I'm saying this because I'm a farmer, and I come from a culture where men own land, and for women are the ones who work on the land, but men own the land. So all these things that we are saying about women, yes, we can train them, we can tell them to do ABC, but what is the role of the man that she goes back to the house and asks, can we do this? How are we involving men in helping with women become better?
Thank you very much. I saw another lady over this side, if we can give her the microphone.
Thank you. Maybe I can start. My name is Fidel Biganiro, and I am from Sustainable Generations here in Rwanda, and I've been working with farmers for quite some time. So what I want to come back on is about the access to financing. I think there's a kind of revolving area where money revolves, where the smaller farmers do not access the financing. So I think conferences like this or something like this should make a kind of mechanism that is and see how the smallholder farmers access the financing. I also insist on what they said about involving youth. There are so many youth who are quite eager to go into agriculture, but they don't have that access of mechanism. So I would propose if there is a quite kind of mechanism that can put on from this conference to ensure that that mechanism to access financing, maybe in IFAD or some other organization who are private, so that they can engage some youth and also smallholder farmers. Let me give an example of here in Rwanda where we find the cooperative formations. So you find that farmers in a kind of scheme or marshland, they are organized.
I'll ask you to please be brief.
Okay, thank you. So that's what I want to insist on. So mechanisms that helps smallholder farmers and also youth to access finance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just have one more last intervention from the audience. Our time is long gone, unfortunately, and the discussion is good. We started really late. I think we started about 10 minutes late, so maybe you'll be patient with me for those other 10 minutes, those of you who can, but if you can understand. Let's have the microphone to the lady over here, and that will be the last intervention. Then we'll watch another video from Io. Yes, that's the one. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Aline Onal from Vanguard Economics. So the smallholder farmers sometimes don't know, they don't value what they did unless someone came and explained to how they can vary what they're doing. So I'm working on the project called AfraKiosk. It's a mobile app that helps farmers and traders first to understand the quality of their grain before selling to the market. So the private sector always found a gap in, between the farmers, the market, and anywhere else. But there is also an issue of enforcement, the government enforcement. So we found the gap on how those farmers can sell the grains up to the premium buyers, because they always reject due to the quality. So AfraKiosk came to help those farmers first to understand what they're doing. So, but always there is also the issue of enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution, and thank you to you all in the audience. We are going to move to the closing remarks. I'd like you to give yourselves a hand for those contributions you've given us. Thank you very much. We really appreciate the contribution. I think what we're hearing is please include the youth, and then when we talk about women, it's not just about women, but also access to land, access to finance, access to all the productive facilities, I believe, innovations, ensuring people know what is the value of what they have, and so that they can, market it better, and all that. It's what I get from the audience, and thank you for your contributions. Now on to the closing remarks as we conclude our wonderful discussion. Thank you really to each one of you that has contributed to the panelists, our keynote speaker. At the end I will have to go back and listen and rewatch everything so that I can synthesize all the lessons I'm getting from here, because it's been a very interesting and informative discussion. So after closing remarks, by video from our partners, the National Labour Organization. Over to you, Molly, with the video. Thank you.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, COVID has had a profound impact on global work. It has exposed and exacerbated the structural challenges and disadvantages across and within countries and regions. The massive loss of working hours and incomes has pushed many workers into poverty. Today, an additional 38 million adults live in extreme poverty. A significant number of them are in Africa. Years of progress in our fight against poverty have been lost, while recovery efforts are undermined by the new multiple crises that have been unfolding globally. These crises have highlighted the importance of building resilient systems across all sectors. This is more so in our food systems, which are essential to all of us. Agriculture makes up half of the employment in Africa, and women workers account for half of the workforce. However, around the globe, agricultural workers face significant decent work deficits. In many countries, agricultural workers remain excluded from legal protections such as minimum wages, paid sick leave, and freedom to organize. There's widespread informality, insecure forms of work, and a lack of social protection. It's noteworthy that 98% of employment in agriculture is informal in Africa. The sector also accounts for the largest share of child labor worldwide. In sub-Saharan Africa, 4 out of every 5 children engaged in child labor are in agriculture. Women, youth, and migrant workers are disproportionately affected by decent work deficits in this sector. All this show that the pandemic has helped to lay bare the frailty of our food systems. It is made clear that building a resilient and sustainable food system requires an approach that addresses decent work deficits while promoting equitable livelihoods for all food system workers. ILO, with its mandate covering the world of work and a unique tripartite structure that gives an equal voice to workers, employment, and governance, has a wide range of tools that are tested, as well as methods to effectively advance such approaches. The implementation of ILO conventions, both the fundamental ones and those who are specific to agriculture, needs to be a priority and includes strengthening labor laws, labor administration, and labor inspection. Improving the quality of work in the sector will require a focus on working conditions, including occupational safety, promoting decent incomes and wages, strengthening social protection and social dialogue, as well as improving productivity and skills. Creating an enabling environment for sustainable enterprise development and enabling small-scale producers to move higher up in the supply chain is equally important to advance equitable livelihoods in the sector. In a continent whose youth creates but also awaits opportunities, improving the quality of jobs will be instrumental in unlocking food systems' potentials as a source of livelihood opportunities for the youth. A just transition towards environmentally sustainable food systems will also be critical. It will require a gender transformative approach, as many environmental challenges and opportunities have a strong gender dimension. With a clear goal of sustainable and human-centered transformation of food systems, with decent work at its core, we must work together to achieve policy coherence through multi-stakeholder involvement. These efforts need to build on the existing continental and global frameworks, such as the 2030 Agenda, the African Union Agenda 2063, and the ILO Abidjan Declaration of 2019. I believe that together we will make a difference, and this will be based on our strengthened joint commitment to make decent work a reality for those working in the food system. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. That was the Assistant Director General and Regional Director for Africa from the International Labour Organization, Ms. Cynthia Samuel Boloncho, with Now, we were, according to the program, supposed to have the national convener for food systems in Nigeria give us a remark, but I believe we lost them somewhere. So, yeah, we'll move on next. I think you remember that we mentioned the coalition while I was doing my opening remarks about decent work and living incomes for all food systems workers. And Christine, already on the podium, thank you very much, Christine, is going to tell us about this. You're welcome. Over to you.
My time is of the essence, so I hopped up here as soon as I could. And please allow me to go off script for 1 minute, because we raised a really important point about sex disaggregated data, and I want to share one stat from a recent CARE report. Out of 84 of the global policies and plans designed to impact hunger in 2020 and 2021, only 4% mentioned women as leaders as part of the solution. 4%. 39% overlooked women entirely. That's unacceptable. The global solutions are not keeping pace with the magnitude of the problem because we continually overlook gender equality. These data gaps have been translated into policy and in our responses, and that needs to change. Okay, back on script, I promise. Today I was here invited to talk about the Decent Work and Living Incomes and Wages Coalition. We've heard a lot of great things that governments, companies are doing, and we've heard from Awan and Seva about some of the needs. I won't go into any of that. I'll just remind us that 2.3% of extreme poor work in agriculture, and that 70% of all children in child labor are in agriculture. We have the power to change that. And a lot of us are already working to change that. And that's why this coalition is trying to bring us all together, mobilize our forces together. This requires action at all levels, global, regional, and national. So we've heard a lot from the panel already about what the coalition can be doing. I'm just going to add in a few more points about promoting labor and human rights, increasing the opportunity for decent and productive employment within the agri-food sector, improving incomes and wages, and strengthening organizations and social dialogue in the sector to ensure the sector has a voice in policy making, in the same way that I was discussing how women need a voice in policy making. We've taken some concrete actions already, and we'd really like you to join us. And where did this come from? So the Decent Work and Living Incomes and Wages Coalition, we benefited from an 18-month process called the Food Systems Summit. I had the pleasure of leading Action Track 4, and so I speak firsthand. Now, all we talked about for 18 months with experts from around the world was how do we advance equitable livelihoods around the world. So we continue to pool our expertise, and this momentum continues to grow. What does this look like so far? We've been sharing a lot of tools, we've been sharing technical support, and we started implementing some concrete programs and initiatives on the ground. None of these things are new to CARE, to ILO, to IFAD. They've all been within our mandates forever. What is new is the coming together of joining forces, and with companies and all these other bodies that the Food System Summit process allowed us to do. So with these combined expertise and mandates, we want to develop and implement policies and interventions targeting food systems that look specifically at integrating employment and labor issues. We want to support them in generating quality employment and entrepreneurial opportunities, especially for youth. We want to facilitate a systems approach through linking the ministries of labor and agriculture, among other government ministries, to make sure that the whole thing is moving together as a system and putting the worker front and center. If you're interested in learning more about this coalition, don't hesitate to come to me or Molly, who's in the room. Molly, if you're still here at the back, feel free to wave. And we'll be here all week. So thank you so much. And thank you very much to our guests and speakers for joining us today too.
Thank you very much, Kristen. That was a wonderful way to tie it all up. So our message to you is let's put in our money, let's put in our effort, let's put in our skills, and make sure we have the equitable livelihoods for all. Thank you, and thanks to the panelists, and thanks to all the participants. Yes. Thank you very much, Maura. Yeah. Oh, see you around. Okay. So I think this brings us to the end of our session, and feel free to, network, link up with people, talk to the panelists if you wish. They're all here for you. Thank you.
And thank you for the